comments on our agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of previous minutes. We've got two meetings, the November meeting and then the November special meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Hear a motion, do we have a second? Motion and a second, all those, well, should we have discussion? No discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, the hurricane storm damage reduction project update. Matt, you want to give us that?
Yeah, a lot of the same what we've been talking about the last few months. If y'all recall, we had discussed here and then went to the TDC and the BCC about the public workshop to discuss alternative beach management strategies. We wanted to push that meeting off. We had a lot of business to take care of at the end of the year last year. So we're looking at, Brian, help me out, probably sometime mid-February. We go ahead and target a date on the calendar. That'll give us enough time to go ahead and put out the public notices, make sure everyone's fully aware and notified. Mid-February sound good?
For the meeting or to?
The public workshop, for the meeting.
Yeah. Probably March or mid-March, actually.
Okay.
There'll be some more discussion with county commission. Even though it's a TDC activity at this point, since the HSDR project, culminated with BCC making a final decision on it. This alternative plan, we want to keep them informed of what we're doing and to make sure that they're in understanding of what we're doing. So there's a few more one-on-ones with those commissioners.
Sounds good.
To basically inform them.
That's
Sounds good.
Make sure we're recording.
All right, and then
we're recorded.
So we'll probably seek approval at the February meeting to go ahead and plan the TDC public workshops for that activity.
All right, sounds good. And then also the other item on my agenda is we received direction from the BCC toward the end of last year, November it was, I believe, to go ahead and seek those permit authorizations that were tied to the HSDR with the sole intent of putting those on the shelves, similar with the direction from the BCC was obtain the permits with the sole intent of just shelving those, just so we had those in case of an emergency. No intent of going out and constructing the project anytime in the near future, but having those authorizations really puts us ahead of the game, so to speak. So we've had a lot of discussions with the Corps of Engineers, the DEP, as to would that adversely affect us with the HSDR project? What would be the requirements for any surveying, any additional data collection on DEP's side? And so far it's been pretty positive. We can use the old survey data that was originally presented by the Corps of Engineers, and it should not affect an HSDR project or a similar variation in the future. So obtaining those permits look like it's not going to be an issue, and that's something we're going to meet with Jay here on in the near future and get a task order and start moving on that as quickly as we can. So that's it for me. Any questions?
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Moving on to old business, our beach code enforcement activity report from our previous two meetings.
Yeah. Okay. Included in your packet is a document that is similar to the document we use in our meetings, and then you were just handed another document that looks just like it. The way to tell the difference is the first document has some red writing when you get back to the recommendations section, and that red writing is the disposition that was taken from the TDC meeting. All right, so I wanted to hand you this document. When you just got handed, it looks like it does not have red writing. This was a document that was revised based on our discussions at our November 21st meeting. And that is what went to the TDC as part of their package for their December 6th meeting. And basic revisions were we added in a lot of the do not do anything. We changed the fee structure based on our discussions in that November 21st meeting. Most of them you can see are contained in the paragraph called Beach Management Committee Meetings. And so that is a brief narrative of the 2 meetings we had prior to the TDC 12-6 meeting. So I just wanted you to have that document so you can compare it against the document we're fixing to go over, which is the one that has the red writing. Okay, so the red writing is the disposition that happened in the TDC meeting. At that meeting, I'm not sure how many of you were there, but we went through a basic discussion. First, it was open to public comment. Several people commented. TDC decided that they would make some recommendations to the BCC, and so then we went through each one of these items by number. So once again, it's the same outline. Primary numbers are the sections of the code. The next level is subsections, and then the next level is the different options that were set forth as possible revision recommendations. So on the first one, 2260A, that's the Public Beach Vendor Management Program. The item was discussed and tabled in favor of being sent back to committee and/or decision by BCC. All right, so they basically decided that it was an item that they would like to have the committee discuss, but since the BCC has, as advisory committees, the information that we're tasked with making recommendations on moves forward and it's tagged with what our recommendation is. All right, so it's moved forward. It's the same thing with the TDC Advisory Council. TDC Council is an advisory council to the Board of County Commissioners. So we don't deduct information. We only send it forward with what our recommendation is. Okay? So in this case, it's moving forward to the BCC. All this same information will be discussed at the BCC meeting today at 4 o'clock. So anyway, so move forward with the disposition of that the TDC feels that it should go back to the different committees, beach management, destination improvement, for further discussion and refinement. But since they are the BCC, they have the ability to say, no, we're going to take it up with the recommendations that are here now. All right, so the recommendation that was made by both us and by TDC was it needs more committee involvement. So they'll have that to consider as they consider that one particular item. Number 2, storage at the toe of the dune. Item was discussed and the third option added and approved as recommendation to BCC, and that third item was leave existing terms in code for no change. And so that would be that it remains as it is. Beach vendors are allowed to store their equipment at the toe of the dune, provided it is to be rented the next day, and then there are some provisions as to how that equipment is to be stored. So that's how that moved through TDC. Next one. Beach equipment setup standards. Item was discussed. Recommendations listed below next to sub-item option. So item A is the distance equipment can be set up adjacent to the water's edge. TDC voted to approve a recommendation of 15 feet. The next one, add verbiage to allow for specified minimum distance for clear quarter at the toe of the dune or most seaward point of dune walkover. They voted for 15 foot on that. Change verbiage to public access aisles to more specific verbiage that allow for 6 foot wide public access. Every fourth chair umbrella setup. TDC voted for approved recommendation of BCC. Item C, this is the tents. They voted to no greater than a 6 by 6 by 6. Item 4, this is paragraph D8 and 10, vendor authorization by open property owner and vendor zones on public beaches associated with neighborhood beach accesses. Item was discussed, recommendation listed below, and they said their recommendation is no change to existing code. So they recommended that paragraph D8 remain like it is. Section 22, penalties, fees, and fines. Item was discussed and tabled in favor of sending back to committee and/or decision by BCC. So this was the area where we were discussing changing the cost of a vendor permit, the initial specific place, and then the any subsequent specific place, as well as the initial delivery vendor permit. So on that one, they didn't really make a decision on it, they just said send it back, and or let the BCC make a decision on it. Number 6, special event, actually 6, 7, and 8 are special event related code. So the first one was paragraphs A and B, add paragraphs to define special events held on public beach must be conducted by a permitted beach vendor, and all required permits for activities for a specific special event must be obtained by the same permitted vendor. And then change in cost of special event permits based on quantity of people. And then item C was limit special events at MBAs based on space available. On all 3 of those, they recommended that it go back to committee and or decision by BCC. Number 7, special event permit application. Those 2 items in it were change verbiage for a permit required based on quantity of people from 50 to 30. And then make no change in current verbiage, a special permit required for greater than 50 people. That item they also sent back to committee and or decision by BCC. Number 8, permit application, basically permit application process, what items need to be included in that application, as well as adding some verbiage for proximity to established turtle nests. Once again, that item was sent back or tabled and or decision by BCC. 2254, which is general regulations of use and conduct on the beach. They had a few recommendations on that. So item A, that paragraph prohibiting and restricting use of generators on the beach. They selected option number 2, which would restrict based on noise output level, power output, and or physical size. TDC voted to approve that to move forward to VCC, or approve recommendation to it. Paragraph B, add paragraph prohibiting steel-bladed shovels. This was an attempt to minimize and mitigate holes on the beach. They approved items 1 and 2, exceptions for authorized personnel, and exceptions for specific place permitted vendor personnel. Items 1 and 2 really are kind of the same thing, authorized personnel. So if a specific place vendor has it included in their list of equipment, then it would be allowed by them. So they're kind of authorized personnel. Once again, that was an attempt to minimize holes on the beach. Item C is the sister to the vendor section that has the size of the tent, and they have the same recommendation, no greater than a 6x6x6. Paragraph D and paragraph E are also sister accompaniments to the vendor section, where the clear distance from the water's edge and the clear distance from the toe of the dam. So in both those cases, they recommend the same thing they did for that, which was 15 feet. So this document has been included in the BCC's package today. We have a section under our tab to discuss the what happened at the TDC meeting, and then Mark Davis County Legal Department has a section under their tab that includes the revisions, the actual revisions to the language of the code based on these recommendations by the TDC. So today there will be some discussion. Code revisions require a public hearing, which have either a 10 or 14-day notice requirement. So under our tab, it will basically be a discussion and decision on the concept of changes, and then under the legals tab will be setting up the future public hearing to have code revision, discussion, and decision. So I encourage everybody to be there to observe, add input, either as a beach management committee member and/or as an individual of our community. And there will be, like I say, robust discussion, and hopefully decisions will be made that will make the beach a better place. Any questions, comments?
So the meeting today is just to move forward to a public hearing?
Correct. Like I said, under our section, what I call the concept of these recommendations will be discussed and decided on.
Now, we have to have 2 public hearings, right? Just one or?
One public hearing, so they'll advertise it, they'll have the public hearing, and then on that day, there'll be more discussion, and then a decision to adopt that code language that has been put forth by the legal department.
Now, so the legal department's going to write the code, basically, clarify it, you know, so maybe.
They have submitted, it's on the agenda item, did we not print that out? The legal department's agenda item submission. Apologize.
It has to go with those language.
Yeah. Where's Lisa?
She's gone.
Can you ask her to print that out for us? Appreciate that.
Thank you, Josh.
Just ask her to print out legal department's item. So anyway, just a second. So the legal department is taking this document that came from the TDC meeting, and they have made what I call a draft language revision that mirrors these recommendations. And so that'll be it could be part of the discussion today, but the real discussion will come in at the actual public hearing for code revisions amendments. And of course, any input in between then will also be considered by legal department for the submission item for that future public hearing. Yes, ma'am.
Are we going to try to address these ones that were sent back to committee today?
We'll see what the BCC says, because like I say, the BCC has the ability to make a decision on those today. So what they have in their knowledge now is what our recommendations were as a beach management committee, as well as what the TDC recommendations were. When I say recommendations, I mean disposition on those items. And so at this meeting today, they could very well say, Brian, based on item 1 and the comment or the disposition from the TDC meeting, we don't accept that this is a revision that we want to discuss today, and we are sending it back to TDC and other advisory committees for further discussion and refinement. See what I'm saying?
Yes.
And at that point, legal department should then understand that they have some changes to do to the document that they have submitted to this BCC meeting today. Okay.
And my second question is, I wasn't able to attend the TDC meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
And I did view the video. However, serendipitously, I suppose, the video did not have like the discussion section about all of this just was not there. So on a couple of these items, I'm just interested in what was presented, particularly on the minimum distance from the toe of the dune for the clear corridor. I'm concerned, and have been for a long time, about pushing the driving corridor as close to the dunes as we can because of the turtles.
Yes, ma'am.
Because of damage to vegetation that helps build the dunes. And while I understand, or at least I was told at one point that the logic for using 25 feet or not using 25 feet was that we had some severely eroded beaches.
Yes, ma'am.
That it didn't really allow 25 feet. And my comment on that was, you know, if we've got something that's that severely eroded, that we can't stay roughly 25 feet from a dune line and turtle nest and things like that, you know, I'd like to see us focusing on trying to help that section of beach recover, and maybe put some sand fencing and things like that that would help build the dunes rather than continue to erode it by driving on it and encouraging, masses of people to
Okay.
be up as
Yeah.
close to the dunes as they might end up.
Right.
But that said, I didn't get an opportunity because I wasn't at that meeting, but that's, I was out of town.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to read the meeting minutes?
I tried to read some of the stuff, I did read the stuff where I knew some of this, but was there any real
Yeah.
discussion on?
Well, what was
that?
presented to them for discussion was the document that came out of our our November 21st meeting.
Right.
And so as you can see there were a couple different options on what to do there. Now, the problem you have presented, it has a lot of different factors or items associated with it, okay? So, while we too are good stewards of the beach, part of our stewardship is collecting garbage and enforcing codes and Florida statute on the beach. So it requires vehicles traversing east and west along the beach. And depending on what time of year it is, we can be environmentally good by driving on the rack line. But during summers, this is absolutely impossible because our beaches are fairly narrow because they are critically eroded. Critically eroded beach is not necessarily a beach that's narrow, it's the elevation of the beach. The elevation of the beach, if it's not to a certain height, high tides come up, scour the beach, and the beach, correct me if I'm wrong, tries to reach equilibrium by taking sand from the dune system, depositing it onto the flat sandy portion of the beach, and there is some accretion from the first sandbar up onto the beach.
And I do understand all that, Brian. What I wondered though, because I really couldn't tell it from the things I could read,
Right.
is were these particular things discussed with the TDC or not?
They were.
Right.
About the erosion, about the fact that the turtle nest or at the dune lines, etc. Were they actually mentioned at the TDC meeting?
Well, they were, and when I say, not specific, I didn't say that, we have to consider the turtle nests in this 25-foot area, give us 10 feet for our trucks and 15 feet for the turtle nest. All of the TDC council members have an understanding of all the dynamics of the beach. And so it is my hope and understanding that they consider all that without having to be specifically told that, because really what it come down to is what item on the beach do you want to eliminate, right? They're 25 foot, or in some areas the distance from the water's edge to the toe of the dune is 30 feet. If we have, or just say 35 feet. If we have a 15-foot clear area at the water's edge and a 15-foot distance at the toe of the dune, or 25-foot distance toe of the dune, then in that case it leaves 5 feet. So do we want to admit vendors, general public, relocate turtle nests to a more appropriate location, or what? And so your question comes down to which item do you want to eliminate? Do you want to eliminate garbage collection? Do you want to eliminate law enforcement? And so they have to weigh all that. And
I agree. I do understand that. I just was curious how much, because there's, the TDC's job is about tourists.
Yeah,
That's their primary job, so I just wondered how much of that.
with tourism, is people come to our beaches because they like our natural beach and our basic community attitude on preservation of the natural resource. So they do consider all that. It's not just, we got to get people down here to enjoy this white sand and damn everything else. They do consider. And the people on the board, most of those people. I believe that they are the people that are on the TDC council. Most of those people. I believe that the board's made up of a good mix of people that understand all those dynamics.
Yeah, Lisa, I was at the meeting and there was some good discussion, balancing 10 foot, 15 foot, and then even on the water side. And then it did specifically come up, a couple of the TDC council members had said, well, what about Inlet Beach? Because you only got 40 feet of beach. By the time you take away 10 here, 15, just like Brian said. So they did discuss it in detail, and then it all came down to, well, we've got to provide the greatest amount of access we can for the emergency vehicles. And then that's when they went with the 15-foot. So there was a good discussion on it.
Okay, thanks, I appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments on the information? David? No? Yeah. Questions, comments from the general public? Yes, sir.
Bob Brooke, just a general comment regarding the amount of beach you have from the toe of the dune to the water line. I have spent a lot of time walking on the beach in the last 10 years since I moved here. And I know times back in the 2007, 2008 timeframe where the water actually came up right to the toe of the dunes. To walk on the beach, you had to climb over snow fences on the dune. So you can't tell. And I can tell you, show you the same place where there's 150 feet of sand in front of the dunes today.
Yes, sir.
It changes from day to day, from year to year, sometimes drastically. So it's very difficult to pinpoint an amount, and I agree that you need some methodology for allowing the emergency vehicles to go.
Right. That's why we
almost pick a number, to be honest with you.
You know, like I say, the TDC, I believe, came up with what they thought was a appropriate distance. And the two demarcation points that we measure from, we believe are the easiest ones to define on any beach on any given day. Now, you know, arguing where the water's edge is exactly is, you know, we're not going to be down there to take measures. The intent of that distance, or the reason for regulating that specific item, equipment in relation to the water's edge, is an attempt to minimize, mitigate the problem, the true problem. And the true problem is trying to prevent people from setting up in front of you. Okay? So when people go to the beaches in Walton County, they want to be at the water's edge and they want to be the first row. That's just, you know, traditional beach activity. And so what happens is the vendor comes down in the morning, he sets his chairs up, and since they're unattended, they set them up in close proximity to the water so other people can't come down and set up in front of them. If there's people sitting in these chairs, you don't generally have a problem with somebody setting up in front of you. Okay? So then the other side of that is the general public wants to get that waterfront seat, and so they try to beat the vendor down there, and they do the same thing. They set up. So the end result is people traversing east and west, walking, enjoying our beach, have a hard time getting by. So that's why we came up with the concept of establishing, because the current code also says a reasonable distance from the water's edge. So back when the code was written or revised last time, there was an attempt to regulate this kind of behavior, but a specific, you got to be specific. You know, a reasonable distance is different between me and you. You know, the reasonable distance is what's the distance will keep people from setting up in front of me. And so, but we have to have, code enforcement has to have some sort of defined language so we can say, you know, general people have a pace of about 3 feet. So it's very easy to pace it off quickly and say, this is where you need to be, please move the chair back. Hopefully, as time goes by, people will start to recognize that, and we'll have the issue, and we will have solved the problem of people, you know, hugging up next to the rack line and causing these issues of people moving back and forth along the water's edge. The same thing at the toe of the dune. We had issues over the last couple of years, several years probably, before my time, of the beach fills up and we can't get by. You know, our maintenance vehicles can't get by, our code enforcement guys can't get by. And so there had to be something up there. And so that's why it's toe of dune or southernmost point of a structure being a boardwalk, because those boardwalks come out past toe of dune. So, anyway. Yes, sir.
Mine was about the 15 feet back issue as well, and I was just, it seems like there's no provision, like if, as far as vendor sets, and more on specific place contracts, For one thing, a lot of places, for instance, Edgewater is the one I'm most familiar with, so it's the one I'm going to use as an example. They have, almost 1,000 feet of beach. There's no public or even neighborhood accesses. It's about a mile to the nearest one. They don't have a problem with the public coming and sitting in front of their seats, and they even give all their customers a set of chairs.
Right.
So all of their customers are going to have to set back 15 feet now behind nobody, because there's nobody setting up in front of them. No one brings their own stuff down when they get given a $500 set of chairs for the week. So there's no provision for that. They have to sit 15 back for no reason, it seems like. And then places like my contract, Grand Dunes, there are times where, because there's the hump at the front of the beach, and then the back is low, the whole beach is underwater. I have pictures that I can prove this, and I have a feeling that my hump is going to be within 15 feet of the water's edge, and that's the only dry spot on the whole of our beach. Other than driving around at the 15 feet that we're going to leave empty up top, where I would never put chairs anyway.
Right.
So there's still room for the emergency guys to get by, but you're basically saying I won't be able to set up on those days. And I do keep track. I can show you from last year, there was at least about a dozen days that anytime the surf gets big, we're just in a low-lying area. I'd like to see a provision for emergency situations, I guess is what I'm saying. Stuff like that, where that happens, where I don't get shut down.
Yeah, the beach down there is, of course, different because it's renourished and it has an erosion control line. And so actually, by definition of your permit, you're not really allowed to set up seaward erosion control line. And that's about 60 feet from the water's edge there. We don't enforce that, because it does create another bigger issue down there. But I understand what you're saying, and I'm privy to that, tidal pool type relation you're talking about. But since it can be different on any given day,
Well, it just raised a whole other issue. Why hasn't that been addressed? Seriously, I have to put.
Why hasn't what been addressed?
The 60 feet back erosion control.
Well, it actually started cropping up about 2 years ago. And I've asked for advisement on, what to do from legal department. Right now, there is no advisement what to do. So we generally enforce it like we do all the rest of the beaches. We don't make any action on making vendors in that area, a specific waste permit, actually abide by what the permit actually says. We recognize that, when that erosion control line was established, it changed the relationship, literal rights of that Gulf front property owner. Fire Statute 161 has some other verbiage in it that regulates how that beach can be used. And it's got some inconsistencies with our ordinance or code. So,
well, I'm sure, Edgewater, there's some special considerations there, I think, that I'm aware of.
there are.
And our property was actually part of theirs when that was originally.
Yeah, there are some provisions for the some of the equipment you're allowed to keep on the beach overnight. Most of us regard leaving a trace ordinance, but I would say that I would bring that point up at the BCC meeting this afternoon, so that there can be proper discussion on it. But keep in mind that somebody else might bring up the ECL line issue as well. So,
I guess what it is blanket-wide stuff that we're enacting here that doesn't allow for specific instances. It's just, we got 28 miles of beach, and not every 100 yards is even the same as the next 100 yards.
oh, and you're right. And the beach on the western end is vastly different in its physical parameters as well as its clientele interaction than on the eastern end. And so it is kind of tough to make blanket rules.
Well, that's what
but it's also
I'd like to see some kind of a recommendation to allow for emergency, something where it's not just an all-encompassing rule and that doesn't take into account that there are these different situations.
I think, I can see part of this discussion is how often does this described situation happen, and how adversely does it affect your client, the Gulf front owner. And then there should be appropriate decision-making processes as to what they want to do with that. BCC has the ability to say, we'd like to do this here and do that there. They don't have much of a precedent of doing that, which is why some of our codes, favor other parts of the beach than not favor other parts.
One last thing, stop taking up your time. It does seem to me that if you have a specific place permit, and in our area where you're talking about the 60-foot and the erosion control line and all that, and then you have a delivery permit as well, wouldn't my delivery permit, having permission from the upland property owner, then allow me to set up down below that erosion control line?
Well, those beaches are a little bit different, and that's where the inconsistency in the code comes. See, that beach and seaward of that erosion control line is Florida state property and not county property. Whereas the delivery permit allows you to deliver to public beach, county-owned beach. It would also allow you to deliver to private beach as well. I mean, you can deliver, a delivery permit allows you to deliver wherever you would like. There are some other parts of the code that you have to satisfy if it's on private property. But yeah, like I said,
Some inconsistencies, I'm done.
yeah. Yes, sir.
I'm David Bailey, and I'm here as the town manager of Rosemary Beach. And we also have an in-house beach service that consists of 600 sets and paddleboards and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, sir.
I had a conversation yesterday with Mr. Neville, who has a service in Seaside, has, I believe, 300 plus sets, 400 sets now. Also present at the conversation was Don Carlin with La Dolce Vita, and I believe Don operates in this county 1,000 plus sets. So we represent a pretty significant amount of beach vending in a couple of the pretty significant communities in town. So these comments that I have are, I think, generally reflect, and Larry's here, so he can certainly correct me if I say anything that doesn't represent his perspective as well. And I very much appreciate the difficulty of trying to manage what's going on the beach. Obviously, it's in a sense, a good problem to have. It's a product of success.
Right.
So I just want you to appreciate it. I'm going to try to make some pretty specific comments, maybe kind of blunt, but with the context that I appreciate what we're all working on together here. So one of the challenges we discussed is that Chapter 22 with these revisions is becoming, it's not just this round of revisions, prior round of revisions, is starting to become fairly difficult to understand in terms of which one of the various types of vendors the regulations apply to. I'll mention in a second a couple examples of that. And I in my past life have been responsible for writing land development codes and things like that, so I appreciate again the difficulty of doing it. But I'm seeing signs that the code may need a complete revamp. This section of the code may need a revamp rather than continued small modifications. And most fundamentally, what I see is lacking in the current version of the code is the distinction between what we've come up with in our conversation of three types of vendors. There are vendors that operate on the publicly owned beaches, and I believe that those are considered in some sections of this chapter are considered delivery vendors. Delivery vendors is not defined, and vending is defined, but not the specific types. The second type of vendor are vendors that operate on privately owned individual lots, and I know in some cases they're considered delivery vendors. It's not clear to me as an example whether special events permits apply to those folks or not. I believe maybe in some cases it does, some cases it doesn't. And the third type, and this is the one that we think is largely omitted in consideration, are the in-house or contracted vendors on private beach communities, private community-owned beaches. And I'll just use the word resorts to describe that type of vendor for the rest of my comments. Let's see here. I guess my ultimate message is that perhaps we need to slow down the process a little bit, where by the time these changes get adopted to public hearings and the vote, we're going to be about a month away from the start of the 2017 season. Correct. We have a lot of some other very significant issues in front of us. April 1st, of course, unless something changes, the customary use ordinance will go into effect.
Correct.
I don't have any idea what the outcome of that's going to be in practice on the beach, and that makes me nervous. I'd be surprised if anybody here really has an idea of what's going to happen once that goes into effect. So that single change right there is something that makes me nervous. I think Larry and Don also shared that. So some of the other changes on top of that, we're starting to get very, very nervous that we don't have a good grasp of what we're facing. We'll be kicking off on March 1st, plus or minus. So just a couple examples. And again, this is the intent here is not to dogpile on or anything like that. It's just to just share with you some of the concerns. And I guess when I finish making these comments, it would be helpful to understand during this meeting, you mentioned that the intent here is to get some more feedback, and some of the items in the red line document, the sense is they'll go back to committee. But I am aware that...
Let me stop it right here just for a minute. Okay. So we've had a lot of opportunities for input. Okay. In fact, started last year in this committee in March with please bring back, committee members, please review code, review our beach, accesses, and come back with items in May, and then we missed a meeting in June or July, and then in September or November we had two big meetings, TDC meetings, been held too, and so where the recommendation is to go back to committee. Once again, that is a disposition by an advisory council that is being brought to the BCC today.
Okay.
So the BCC will make a decision on whether they want to go back to committee or not. Okay. So the way the advisory council works is information was presented as by the beach code enforcement department, regulators of the beach. We compile that information based on our activity, complaints we receive, other various forms of input we receive, be it from what I call constructive input or destructive input, and then we take all that together and and that's how we develop those recommendations. And so at each advisory council level, the information is not omitted. It just receives a disposition of what that advisory council recommends or does not recommend. Okay, so that's what this document is there. And so today the BCC will make final determination or decision on what they would like as a concept. Now, when I say final decision, that won't be the final decision on the revision to the code. It'll just be the final decision. Final is probably not the appropriate word. It'll be today's decision on accepting the concept of revisions. Okay?
All right. So the process, and I'll sort of summarize that, and I attended some of the meetings, not all the meetings, I acknowledge that, but some of the meetings. And as an example, I reviewed the red line draft that I was circulating, I believe in the November timeframe before some of the public meetings that were held over in South Annex. And
red line version of the existing Chapter 22?
I don't know if it was, I can't frankly remember if it was a red line version of Chapter 22 or if it was the summary document that had the options, the TDC memo,
okay,
that had the options, and y'all were honing in at the time on which one of the options seemed to make sense and which might have no change, etc. So that was in November, and my review of that document at the time, I concluded that for the most part, the revisions did not apply to the resort-type vendors. And in the most recent revision, there are a couple that do apply, as far as I can tell, to the resort-type vendors. The setback off the water's edge, I think, has been, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, I'm ready to be corrected, but it was a relatively latecomer to the comments. And so I don't know where I missed it along the way, but that's a pretty significant revision from our perspective. Again, keeping in mind, I'll just speak for myself right now, I've got about 3,000 feet of beach, so moving us back, in effect, one row, has a pretty significant effect on the number of sets that we can put out. I've invested, as of this week, in another 100 sets, $250,000 plus dollars. And if I suddenly discover a month before the season that I'm going to have to, I don't know what I'll do with them, suddenly I'm down an entire row across 3,000 feet of beach, it's concerning to me.
Okay. What would you think would be a appropriate change to the existing code to help change the behavior of putting the chair legs in the water?
Well, I'll give you an example, and you made a comment a little bit earlier that the occasion that someone will come along and set up in front, let's just say for discussion purposes, that we did set the chairs back, and let's say we checked the tide and we said, okay, it's pretty close to high tide right now, we'll come back 15 feet, maybe we set up and we say, you know what, it's low tide right now, we'll account for the low tide, we'll sort of agree with the spirit.
Right.
And we'll pull back, and maybe we have it set up, we have 20-something feet clear. You make the comment that it's not all that often that folks will set up in front of that front row of the, in our case, resort vendors' chairs. I've got to disagree with that, and I know Larry disagrees with that. We have a major
Leave that
problem.
spot, they're taking it immediately.
Yeah. And you've got to appreciate the, particularly at locations in Rosemary's case, at our eastern end, we have a public access. Seaside's case, I was telling you, Seaside, right, we got the western end. And, you know, again, product of success. These communities are very successful. Lots of people want to come hang out with us. That's great. The challenge is that we have owners that are paying tens of thousands of dollars for their accommodations and hundreds of dollars for their chairs if they have one set. They could be in the thousands of dollars if they have a whole family there. And they're not real pleased when someone sets up right in front of them. So how do we solve that problem? That was your question to me. I'm not sure, but that's the reason I'm here today, suggesting maybe we need to slow down a little bit and tackle that issue. I can appreciate the difficulty of administering all the different services, emergency services, etc. And you know, whether pickup trucks are the right vehicle or ATVs are the right vehicle, whether more lifeguards stationed on the beaches is the right way to do it. I think we need to have that conversation, and it's something that we couldn't have foreseen. None of us could have foreseen 10 years ago. We didn't know how much success we were going to have. So, you know, so again, I feel like we are getting to a point that continuing to make, I don't want to use the word piecemeal, it may not be the best word, modifications. I appreciate the intent. The problem, the definition of the issues, I think, is very good. The writing of the code to address those issues is what I'm trying to raise a concern about.
All right.
So, and again, I'll just to support this, so I'm not talking about you know, that school here. This actually the first just happens to be the first one I so this is the only one like this, but just a little mathematical calculation here. 6 by 6 by 6 square feet is not 6 square cubic feet. It's 36 cubic feet.
That's correct. That was an attempt.
I do run.
Go ahead.
I do run a VIP service. We call it Club Cabana. Man, it's very expensive. I do have several 10 by 10 tents that we rent out to high-end customers out there on a daily basis in the season. Under this, I wouldn't be able to do that at all.
Isn't there provision in that code language that says it doesn't affect private property?
Well, that's the definition. The language in the code itself doesn't make that distinction. It uses the phrase "the beach." The definition of the beach in the definition section, bear with me while I get all technical on, is defined as the flat sandy, is the beaches. Right. Doesn't distinguish between public and private.
But on this particular issue of tents,
yes,
doesn't the proposed code language revision include an exception for private property?
Yes,
well, it shows up in two places, and in one of them it doesn't. The way I understand it, and again, I'm sensitive to reading the code. I go back to the start of the section, I read all the subparagraphs. As far as I can tell, section, let's see, I don't want to get too bogged down in the details here. Section 22-60 is titled Beach Vendors.
Correct.
The policy under paragraph A appears to apply to all the beaches, and that makes a lot of sense. So I then start reading down A, B, C, D. Paragraph D has 13 items. At the bottom of it, it says, vending of tents greater than 6 cubic feet shall be prohibited. Section 20-60 applies, as best I can tell, to all beaches. Paragraph 13 of that chapter, which doesn't have any subparagraphs with an exception, It's a very simple statement, and again, with correction to 36 cubic feet. It appears that it applies to all beaches. And I guess, and I don't want to pick on anyone, but this is what I'm saying is that the construction of the chapter is starting to come apart.
I see, I see what you're saying, and I recognize the struggle to distinguish what is applicable to public beach and what is applicable to what we call HOA, community or collectively owned beach, or even single-family dwelling that owns down to the main high water line. So I can appreciate that. And I wish that we could have had more discussion, input from you earlier. I think that you need to be at the meeting this afternoon, and you need to stand up and you need to explain exactly what you've explained here. Because, like I say, through this advisory council process, we try to, and we did, add information to it. And this could have been a good addition of information that went along with it, so that the BCC would already be in the thought process of this.
Okay. And again, appreciate that it's been relatively recently that the customary, and I'm just going to, the elephant in the room for us is the customary use issue. And, you know, that came along relatively recently.
Right.
The last round of public workshops, Ken, I think I've been, if I wasn't at the meeting, I was reading the material for the meeting.
Right.
And I was quietly in the background watching to see, was this going to affect me, my Rosemary Beach, my operation?
Yes, sir.
And it wasn't until reading this document that I came to the conclusion, this is going to affect me.
Right. The distance from the waters.
That's right. Well, that was, you know, one of them. Again, that caused me to go back through and start really scrutinizing the structure of Chapter 22.
Yeah.
And that example I just gave you, 22-60. So,
Right.
so again, I apologize. I've been on your side in terms of trying to rewrite things.
Yeah.
At the last minute,
No,
someone comes in and
that's
they
right.
drop the wrench into the gear set.
No, and I don't think of it like that. I mean, I do make the comment that I wish there would have been, you know, previous involvement of this type of elaborate discussion. You keep in mind, I mean, beach code enforcement looks at it in a couple of ways. One of them is operational efficiency. Okay, so we have to have a definition. You know, reasonable distance from the water's edge. If you go back and look through our last 2-year revision recommendations, that has been in there to change that to a specific distance and a specific demarcation point, so that we can effectively regulate it. But as my previous statement is the intent is to, we understand that you don't want people set up in front of you. And so that's why we're trying to figure out what is that distance. You know, is it 5 feet? Is it 6 feet? To be honest with you, I don't want to say I don't care, but it makes no difference to me what that distance is, as long as that when Jeff and company are on the beach, that if there is an issue, they can say, I need you to move your chair back.
And I agree, and that's what I'll state again. I think what has happened well during this process is an excellent job of identifying the problems.
Right.
But we've dedicated 2 years to identifying the problems, which are relatively recent. Again, last 5 or 10 years, we've had these problems crop up.
Right.
The challenge, as I see it from an administrative point of view, is we're now coming up with the solutions in a very short time frame.
Yeah.
And so I'll try to make my message to the.
Yeah, I would differ with you on that, and we've been working on this for all year.
Yeah.
I went to the TDC on October 6th with these revision recommendations.
Yeah.
And then it got pushed back to the Beach Management Committee meeting, and then we had 2 of those meetings, and then back to the TDC, and then now it's here. So,
Well, we talked about the tent issue a little bit, pretty vigorously in some of our committee meetings.
Yeah.
And, you know, the one thing we came up with, that Walmart doesn't even sell a 6x6 tent.
No, and
You know, so, I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. I was just sitting here reading this, and that it's different on the public beach than the private beach, and that, to me, is just gonna be an enforcement nightmare. You know, if you got a guy, 20 feet apart, one guy's allowed to have his 10 by 10, you know, or whatever is on private property, and then code enforcement comes up to a guy right next to him and says, no, you gotta move yours, you know? What about his, you know, and how are they gonna enforce that? Is that gonna end up fist fight on the beach or something, you
Well,
know?
there's often different rules for public property versus private property. Now, when I say private property, we do have some properties in Walton County that are under the mean high water line. Now,
It's still, it's an enforcement issue. It's gonna be hard to enforce, you know, two side-by-side tents, you know, that one can be one size and one's gotta be a different size.
well, understanding private property rights, we have to give consideration to that. We actually have the same
But
provision.
we do, we got
for
beach
dogs.
etiquette rules, basically, you know, and we could probably come up with a tent size that private property owners and vendors and everybody would be okay with, and then just make a rule for the whole beach, so then it can be enforced.
Yeah, and I don't mean to get into back and forth, not appropriate, me sitting on this side doing that, but since you raised the tent issue, if y'all are okay, I'm gonna make a comment about how Rosemary has been dealing with it.
Yeah.
We recognize that 10 by 10 tents, got little kids and 9-month-old, and I want her under a tent. As you all know, the sun moves around, and a 10 by 10 tent is hard enough to keep the shade, under control.
Right.
The way we deal with it in Rosemary is we simply don't allow tents to be set up. We plan for 3 rows in some sections, and the tents may not be set up except in the 3rd row back. So the issue with them blocking people's views is handled that way. Now, to administer that across 26 miles of beach is probably also a headache, but individually, that's how we handle it. And again, we define the problem. Okay, tents blocking people's view is a problem. We also define the fact that the tents solve the problem, which is people who don't want to get sunburned need something that size. So we came up with a solution that we felt was the happy medium that solves the problem. So, Brian, again, I want to stress, I'm not in here to attack, pick on anybody.
Yeah, I don't consider that.
But the sausage being made, from a user's perspective, or that person being regulated's perspective, I'm kind of sitting at the end of it, waiting for the sausage to come out, so I know what I'm dealing with. And so,
I understand.
all of the things that were happening over the past several months or years, I didn't, literally, it's been November, and the reality is December, we were distracted with other things. So we were pretty early in January, and again, I'm suddenly realizing that I may have invested the wrong amount of money in the number of sets for the beach because of these different problems that are trying to be solved. And it's just the final sausage coming out the end of the machine here is not looking too appealing to me. And I think Larry and Don agree. And that's the only folks I'm speaking for at this point.
Yeah.
The small vendors have other issues. But
No, I understand, and I appreciate it. I don't consider you to be, agitated or whatever. Sometimes I speak very frankly, and, I would appreciate that if I was on their side of the table.
yeah.
Okay, so, but once again, to use your analogy of sausage is not made yet. Today,
Well,
today is a discussion.
Okay, but am I, and this may be, again, maybe I am getting prematurely alarmed here, but let's just use the distance from the water's edge.
Mm-hmm.
If the BCC chooses to adopt that this evening, is it going to affect the 2017 season?
If it continues on to the public hearing, where the actual code amendment is adopted,
Yes.
then yes, it would be. It would go into effect whatever date they set it to go into effect. So just like customary use was adopted in, what was it? I can't remember what day it was.
Just to be clear, the way it was noticed, today is the first public hearing. The next, it wasn't.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I have to go look and see how it was done, but
It's on the agenda as, and that's what I was reading from, is the red line document. This is,
Okay.
just by my understanding of things, and again, I've done this disco before.
Yeah.
This is the first public hearing tonight. The next meeting, if it's on the agenda, there'll be a vote, and it will go into effect at whatever date they want it to go into effect.
okay.
If it is immediately, it's 1 month before the 2017 season.
Right.
So
Okay.
they can vote on it today if they want. I've been super involved in this process.
They can't vote on
They can't vote
code.
today.
They can't
It's
vote
two
on
public
code.
hearings and a
Right.
vote. And the first,
That's
the
right.
introduction is the first hearing, the second meeting is the second hearing,
Right.
and the vote happens at the conclusion of that item.
Right.
Okay,
You're exactly right.
I'm absolutely certain of that.
No, but
Okay.
from my understanding, I've been, at the end of 2015, I started to become very involved. I'm a vendor as well. we're on the same page with everything. I've expressed my interest as a vendor, and I understand that I have to do what's best for the community and not myself. So it's been a year that I've been essentially discussing this. That passed, nothing happened. This year, it came up again, September, October. You've missed 2 or 3 really, I use the word exciting discussions in here that I have voiced my opinion that I believe that you stand for as well on behalf of vendor. Unfortunately, 95% of what I fought for was not recommended by this committee, and that's fine. It then goes to the TDC committee. The TDC committee was really not super aware of a lot of the stuff, and they have a lot of things on their agenda. They recommended certain things, which now it goes before the BCC. The BCC can take a stance today that says, we really believe we want to do this, this, and this, but we need to get the legal words drafted up. We need to have a public hearing, but pretty much this is the direction we're going. Your time and your discussion in this meeting is very much appreciated. But to be frank, that's why I'm not saying very much, is because there's nothing that this committee can really do at this point, because it has to go here, has to go to the TDC, they then make their recommendation, and then it goes all the way to the BCC. So I've been really making an effort to get together every vendor there is. I've tried to reach out to everyone to come together as one, because that's extremely important at today's 4 p.m. meeting. You just say exactly every single thing you said today. Another note on this 15-foot is technically the way it's written now, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, is the general public is technically not allowed to set up in the 15 feet. That's a nightmare to begin with. Can you imagine Jeff and his staff having to go up to somebody with their toes in the sand and say, get out of here? I mean, I completely agree there's a lot of issues. The only way it's going to change at this point, because I'm on your side and we agree on pretty much everything, is it has to be discussed with the county commissioners. That every single one of you guys need to speak and voice your concern. And at this point, the game may or may not do anything. And if it happens, it is what it is. I've chosen priorities in my life that I'm not going to die if it goes through. But that's where we stand in this. This committee can do nothing. TDC can do nothing. It's really in the lap of the county commissioners and their decision. But like we were saying, they may say, we really need to give enforcement a year. We really need to see what happens with the customary use. We really need to see what happens with vendors forming an association and really caring. And hopefully we have that opportunity. But that, as close as I am to the situation, I think that's a fair summary of where it is now. So it's extremely important from here on out. Everything that involves the county commissioners, we be involved in and express our opinion.
Fairly accurate. Disagree with this committee can do nothing. They have been doing something.
I'm saying on a very short time frame. I think this committee can do something, but as far as like something for 2017 in a month span, I don't think, let's say today.
But Philip, it hasn't been a month span. We've been talking about this since March.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying if we were to decide today, it doesn't matter what it is. We really recommend this. I don't think that it has enough time to go through the process, given today is in January, that if the county commissioners made a decision. That's what I'm saying. Not saying anything about previously.
And like I say, the discussion today could follow what Philip has outlined, as in that we understand all this, we do think it needs to be changed. We don't necessarily want to do it this year, but we're going to develop it for implementation sometime previous to the 2018 vending season.
Thank you.
So, yes, sir. Mr. Nelson, anything?
The 15-foot just really bothers me. I think we could post up 2 of Jeff's guys on my beach all day, every day, and have keep them busy continuously with the 15-foot. I know that from 31 years out there. I've seen it day in and day out, and you leave that space, general public's going to sit there. We're in a really different situation where Seaside actually opens up the center of their town open to the general public. The ends of the town, the homeowners association decides not to do that. So we do open the center of town to the general public. We get a ton of them down there. We deal with them on a daily basis. As soon as they think they know anything about the law in this county, they will throw it right in our face. And I'm not moving an inch. I'm not doing this. And it gets nasty very quickly. And the 15-foot just opened the door for all. Like I said, we could keep those guys busy all day, every day, with 2 guys down there, and it would just be a revolving door. You gotta move, start at the beginning. You gotta move, and that's just,
I understand.
Crazy.
And I think it's very important for you to come today.
I will be there
Explain
today. I really think they need to separate it out, let the resorts that have built themselves and basically built this county with the tourism dollar, Sandestin, Rosemary, Seaside, Watercolor, they've done a great job running their own beaches for years. I don't think the county needs to be in the middle of it. I think they need to make the decisions themselves to do what's best for their town, their community, which helps the whole county, from the TDC dollars to the taxpayers to everything.
Yeah, I think that would be a good discussion point to have. A little more distinguish between a specific place controlled vending area versus the public beach.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
I think all you need to look at is how do you still get the emergency vehicles down there? As long as you
still need the-
can, as long as you can show there's a corridor without that
Well, the
15
corridor
foot.
gives the
There's a handful of days down there where you might have a problem where the tide is up so extremely high, but that is not just us, it's everywhere on the beach. And those days, they will run the water line if they have to. The rest of the time, we do leave a corridor down there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean,
All the time.
I've
That's
spent time on
fine.
all the different parts of the beach, and I'm glad to be corrected by code enforcement, but I gotta say that the 3,000 feet of beach in Rosemary generally has a clear corridor. As soon as you get into Inlet Beach, the corridor disappears.
Oh, yeah.
Moving gear back and forth on the beach with our own truck, trying to, storms or whatever, we have the biggest problem outside. We never have a problem crossing someone else's.
I think you'll find the big resorts in this county have done a great job, more than anybody else,
And we recognize that.
as being
I mean,
great stewards to the county, keeping corridors open, keeping the trash picked up, keeping the customer service at a very high level, bringing back return guests every year, putting money into the TDC with the tax dollars and the TDC bed tax that funds this whole machine that's going on here.
Right, yeah.
I was gonna say that tails into what I said about Edgewater giving everybody chairs already, like you're pulling their customers back for literally no reason.
Like I say, once again, we'll make it clear that that specific distance is not what we're worried about, that actual distance. What we are worried about is a definable distance so that we can carry out.
I think I'm agreeing with him in that I feel like public beaches, yes, but on the resort beaches, especially ones that have been in operation 30 years and been doing business.
Yeah, I would just keep in mind your relationship. I would just keep in mind your relationship to that ECL.
I'm sorry?
I would keep in mind your relationship to the ECL. I feel like that's going to be a contentious item this year. Here's our basic problem, is congestion on the beach. Okay, regardless if it's I'm sure you have congestion issues on your specific place permit. Public beaches, there's no doubt that there is congestion issues. The area that is down west of Topsail, Already Nurse Beach, contains an ECL. It has forest A land seaward of it. Because they are nice and deep, congestion is not so big of a deal, but it's getting there. And like I told you last year and the year before, the issue started cropping up is why are we not enforcing the ECL? And,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'll keep an eye on it. That's a whole nother,
it's a whole other thing, man.
Yeah.
And so, anyway. Okay. Any more comment on? Okay, well, I appreciate everybody's input and enthusiasm for it both ways, and highly encourage you to be at this meeting this afternoon. And if you have input, get up to the podium, and this is what I always try to recommend to people is state the problem, state a viable solution, try to remove as much emotion out of it as you can, and ask for consideration, don't mandate a decision. And what that does is it gives the best traction by the BCC, the best consideration for your issue. And so the other thing is we have this meeting, Beach Management Committee meeting, and it meets every other month, odd months of the year on the first Tuesday of the month. Unless there's a
January and July where there's holidays.
Right, unless there's a holiday involved, we have the thing published. Make sure if you want to be included on our mailing list to give your information to Stacy. And we push out all information via mass emails as well as notices on our website and county website. But previously, this committee was consumed with the HSDR project. When that got tabled last year, I then asked this committee to let's move back to what our original mandate was, and that's beach management. So that's everything associated with how the beach is regulated. As we know, municipal codes can affect private property, definitely affect how we do business on our public beaches. So I encourage you all to come and at least make yourselves aware of what we're discussing. Bring items for discussion. It's a public meeting. I want everybody to offer input. Our goal as beach code enforcement is harmony on the beach to all concerned. And that's people making a living. That's people that are in control of a collective ownership. The general public that comes down, when I say general public, that can be our 7-day visitor or our day visitor or the people that live, second, third tier north of 38. And I realize there's a lot of challenges with that, especially with our critically eroded beaches. The new thing, customary use, is going to create a lot of challenges. So anyway, we're always chasing the elusive harmony on the beach. I personally am neutral on it. Okay, I don't own Gulfront property. Jeff and company do not own Gulfront property, but we are tasked with regulating this Chapter 22. And I'm also tasked with maintaining the beach. Josh Urban is our beach maintenance manager, so we all got to work together. We all got to create this harmony, and we all got to respect each other's personal rights and all that. So the way to do that is in meetings, offering constructive input, and so that's what's up.
Thank you, Frank. Okay, any more comments from the committee? I notice on our schedule, are we moving?
We are.
They didn't let you know?
I know, I was aware of it. I forgot to tell John.
Okay.
All right.
Glad you mentioned that.
Yes. Okay.
I gave you all.
Okay,
There are
Bob,
extra
Bob.
meeting schedules on the counter over here also.
Yeah, so future meetings will be held at South Walton Annex in the boardroom. So everybody come join us there.
That's a little formal.
I think the reason is because of our issues we have with,
Y'all know I struggle every time with this, so.
Do you have a police officer? or deputy there?
no, we use a countywide system called Rainforest, the audio and
Here you
video.
go through the metal
records
detector.
everything. We've been having issues with our setup here mainly because of our connectivity to the internet. And so we don't have those same issues over there most of the time, and so that's why we're having them over there, so that Lisa can watch our video.
Well, they either forgot to turn it back on after the break, or it wasn't working, I don't know which.
It was a problem of both. It was some operator error issues and not being able to recognize that there had been an operator error.
I wondered, because I was trying to be good.
Yeah.
And watch it, but
Yes,
It's still
sir.
gonna be the same kind of informal setting that, I gotta say, I enjoy these,
Yeah.
slightly more.
I don't want to be formal, we follow some Robert's rules of order because we have
We got
to.
enough of the VCC and everything else, I like being able to address it directly.
No, man, you'll always have opportunity in my meetings.
Great.
I had a question on this legal document, this red line. Did somebody make recommendations before that's in the red line and then the comments to the side? Because I'm seeing different stuff that was discussed.
I'm not sure how legal actually came up with,
I'm just talking about like moving the stuff, they take everything off the beach or put it in a collective box maintained by the TDC. I don't remember
That's
anything.
what I was looking at too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all the meetings we went to, that was never said.
So it's like somebody came up with some recommendations and then we all went through this and then there's other comments, new
We were discussing
recommendations.
the TDC meeting about storage and tow of the dune. And in that, they came up, what do we do on specific place permitted areas? And I said, they're required to have a storage box. And so the discussion ensued was, why don't we have them do a storage box on the public beach accesses? I said, well, we don't allow that right now because they're delivery, vendors, and there could be, half a dozen or a dozen, or, one or two. And so, it was, what would you like to see, Brian? I said, I would like to see it the same as we have at Pacific Place, a storage box. But I think it ought to be a collective endeavor by the vendors that use that particular public beach. Two reasons for that is one, that it does solve a problem, solves a couple problems, really. One is it puts you in the same container that is required by Pacific Place vendors. That box was developed to minimize turtle interaction, or not to impede turtles from doing their business on the beach. Second is that a lot of our leave no trace issues are because people drag stuff off y'all stack in the night. And if you go back and look, most of those are a verbal warning, or we'll call you and say, hey, we got your stuff, and we'll put it back up here. So it'll stop that. The second issue is that when your stuff is out there just stacked up, it gives the public the idea that they too can do the same thing. And whereas we used to have a section of what was then called 2013-04 that did not allow the public to store their equipment in tow the dune, we don't have that anymore. And so what we have now is a combination of vendor storage and general public that has come down for the week that really don't follow the nicely stacked and stored idea. The last thing it'll do is it'll help y'all to work together collectively on public beaches. So that's why that recommendation got in there. It was part of the discussion that resulted in no change to the code as far as storage, but let's enhance it with a little bit by having boxes down there. I actually offered up that in the event the vendors don't want to do that or can't make it happen, the Beach Maintenance Department will build boxes to put down there to be managed by vendors that use the public beach. But the end result is to make a cleaner, nicer beach and help us to stop the practice of the general public of just haphazardly piling their stuff up at the toe of the boardwalk on public beaches. Now, the difference in red lines of additions and deletions, I think, is just internal to the legal department.
I see all the comments on the side, they refer to all of our discussions and stuff, but there was some in the body of the language that...
I think that was internal to the legal department and then bouncing it back and forth between head legal and assistant legal.
What do y'all think about that? Collective box.
I think it's a fair compromise amongst, if there's several things I'm battling, I think that's a fair compromise. It's important to the county that we would probably go with.
Yeah, and it's not one box, it can be a couple of boxes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the initial argument against that would be, oh no, I've got to go against so-and-so who's not very nice, and they're not going to share, like a bunch of 6-year-olds. But I think that it's a good experience to work in the spirit of forming an association.
Yeah.
They would all have to work together. We all got to hold each other accountable. That has to happen, but in addition to that, I think in the midst of that, we can share a box or two. That should be acceptable. In my opinion.
I like that idea.
Any other comment?
Okay. Anybody got any more comments? How about the public? Y'all have any comments? Okay, meeting's adjourned.
Appreciate it.
That's